Okay, here we go. Attorney Bruce Boynton.
Yes.
Let me start from the very beginning. Where were you born?
Here in Selma, Alabama, as Bruce Carver Boynton. Dr. Carver was my godfather.
Was he actually your godfather?
Yes, he was.
My goodness. Well, how did that happen?
Well, my mother and father were students at Tuskegee. My mother became very good friends of his, and she got his consent that if she had a first child who was a boy, could she name him after him? And of course, that's what happened. And over the years, even though I was too small to recognize what was being said in the letters, my mother saved the letters from him as it relates to me.
Do you remember him?
Oh, yes. I can remember going to his funeral because my father bought a new suit for me from Jackson Clothing Store. And it was a winter suit, and I can remember being itchy all through the funeral.
Wow, that is amazing.
But I can also remember him.
Wow. What kind of a man was he, from what you remember?
Well, very quietly spoken and very friendly. So I sat on his knee.
Oh. So you were born in Selma. Did you go to school in Selma?
Yeah, I finished B. Hudson High School in 1952 at the age of 14 years.
14 years old? How did you end up being so young and finishing high school?
I started school in 18 months at Selma University Nursing School and proceeded on with the class.
So was it the new building? Is it the building that's built now when you graduated in 52?
Yeah, the building that's there now.
And so after you graduated from R.B. Hudson, what did you do then?
Finished Fisk at the age of 18 years and Howard Law School at the age of 21.
Why did you choose Fisk and how did you choose Howard?
Well, Fisk, because a family friend, Gloria Maddox, Dr. Maddox's wife, had finished Fisk, and she told me a lot of things about the school that I liked. Howard, because it was a black school, and I thought that I could learn more civil rights there than I would at any white school.
So Dr. Maddox, or Gloria Maddox in particular, was friendly with your parents for how long?
Oh yes, from the time that they got here, which is 1949.
And that's when they first met. That's amazing. I didn't realize they had known each other that long.
Oh yes.
No, I sure didn't. So then you go to Howard and you got your law degree from Howard.
Right.
Did you develop any kind of a philosophy, a legal philosophy, or had you already kind of gotten into a civil rights mode by the time you got to Fisk, or when did that start?
Oh, with a family that I was born into. My father came to Selma as a county agent for Dallas County, which he was teaching black farmers modern days of farming. And he was joined by my mother as home demonstration agent in 1930. But he started working for black people to have a right to vote in 1928. And he did so many things here in Dallas County, fighting for black people.
Was his relationship, would you think, with Dr. Carver would have influenced how his approach to dealing with the black farmers?
Well, Yes, certainly that was part of it. But he was from Griffin, Georgia. And his father was a very successful cotton farmer. So much so that he had about 30 field hands. And he had a school for their children. And I'll just tell you this, because I wondered, why would he risk his life as he did, fighting for black people? Do you know where Joyland is? I know about Joyland.
Near Valdosta?
No. Joyland is a black recreation center that black farmers have here in Dallas County. And it consists of 170 acres of land. And my father got the black farmers to raise money to buy that. His sister in Montgomery County is a home demonstration agent like my mother was, teaching the farm wives modern days of housekeeping. And she and her county agent partner have a similar acreage of land called Madison Park. The only two such operations in America like that. Do you know about the community center?
No, I don't believe so.
We're right next to on Franklin Street, right next to the original City Hall and where the city court is now. There is a building that's built out of the same material as City Hall was. That was built by my father.
That was built by your father. Are you talking about where the mural is?
Yes.
That building behind what goes City Hall?
Where the mural.
Where that mural.
Right.
Yeah, there's a mural.
He got a black artist by the name of Felix Gaines to paint those murals. And he was responsible for the first black attorneys to practice law here in Dallas County to save the life of a black guy who was one of his 4-H club students. And he testified before a congressional subcommittee in reference to the passage of the first Civil Rights Act that Congress passed in 1957. So my father, who nobody knows anything about, was quite involved. As a matter of fact, I have an idea of why he was as involved as he was, because he was so involved with black people becoming registered voters that when he lived for a year in Burroughs Infirmary before he died, a nursing home, he would ask every black person who passed down the hallway by his room if they were registered voters. And when he died, there was one representative from SNCC who was working Selma, and he and my mother agreed that he could do a memorial service for my father at the Tabernacle Baptist Church. And it would be a combination memorial service, voting rights meeting. And that was the first voting rights meeting that was held here in Selma. And it continued every week, all during the demonstrations and the meeting.
Last week.
You know, I was under the impression that there was only one meeting that was held at Tabernacle, and that was the one that, in his honor, but I didn't realize that they continued after.
Oh yeah, I came from Nashville, from Chattanooga, and spoke at one of the meetings.
You were in Chattanooga?
I was there for 6 years.
You were in Chattanooga for 6 years?
Because my license were held up by the state of Alabama because of the civil rights case involving the bus station. And during the 6 years, I had gone to Tennessee and taken the Tennessee bar and practiced. As a matter of fact, when I was in Tennessee, I had a friend who was a white lawyer who decided he wanted to run for mayor. And he asked me how much would I charge to be his co-campaign manager. And because I went to Chattanooga in 1961, and I was representing black kids who were demonstrating against an all-white movie theater. And I told him that my charge would be to be retired from representing these kids. He said, if I'm elected, I will arrange that. He was elected, and his wife, my first wife, and I attended the first integrated movie there in Chattanooga. We went to see the movie How the West Was Won. and that was to let everybody know that Chattanooga was a racially desegregated city. That was done in 1962. That was 2 years before Congress passed the Public Accommodation Act.
Wow, that's amazing. I was in Chattanooga a couple of years ago with a delegation from Selma because they've become one of the main tourist destinations now.
Right.
But we got a chance to tour some of the black history sites in Chattanooga, and it's such an amazing city. I did not realize you had been there. So, So what did you come up with as to why you think your father was so dedicated and committed to voter registration?
Well, the thing was, his father and the local white successful farmers entered into an agreement that they would harvest their cotton, but they wouldn't sell it to run the price up. And my uncle tells a story that where every day the whites would come by my grandfather's house and they would ask, "Are you holding Will?" His name was Will Boynton. And he said, "I'm holding." They say, "Hold on." And the price did go up. But then in 1929, the Depression hit. And a lot of them lost everything. My grandfather didn't. But you had some who killed themselves and all. But there was one white farmer who was a friend of his. And the two of them decided that they would go to Florida, go fishing. And they went to Florida. And in coming back, there was a place where the railroad crossed the highway, and the train hit the truck coming back, killing both of them. And I think that caused my father to recognize how racially things could be. And what he was working for was a society like that.
So, all right, so now, and I want to get into your take on how close are we to that, to his vision now, you know, over the last several decades. But first, let's talk a little bit about your legal career.
Right.
And so now, you were at Howard. When did the incident, and tell me the story about what happened that led to your court case, and Alabama not allowing you to practice law?
Oh, well, that was December the 18th, 1958. And I hadn't been back to Selma for 4 years. The reason why is that my parents discovered at an early age that I had a mouth that did not sit well with local white people, that I could upset them with a question. And as a result, they had me to live with my mother's family that had moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I spent most of my time in Philadelphia.
From what age were you in Philadelphia?
Well, from being 14, as I finished high school.
So at 14 years old, you were intimidating the local white community in Selma. With a question could have cost you your life, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, but actually, I was also involved in protesting about segregated travel on the train when I was 6 or 7 years of age. And the thing was that I would be coming back south, and the Philadelphia train was desegregated. You sat any place you wanted to. But when the train got to Washington, D.C., it stopped for about 30 minutes when the extra coaches were put on, and then all the black passengers were moved to the new coaches, leaving whites segregated from blacks. Well, I would refuse to go to the black coach. The conductor would ask me to move, and I'm just 6, 7 years of age. And I would tell him no. And his reply, and all of them had the same reply, so I had the same reply myself. He would say, there's no difference between the two coaches. I then would say, if there's no difference between the coaches, you don't mind me staying here. And that would get me to sit in an integrated coach.
So they didn't move you. They let you stay?
Right.
Wow. That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know. Okay, now, so 1958, you're coming home, and were you coming by train or by bus? How were you traveling?
By bus. I waited until the last minute to decide to come home, and by then, you had plane travel and you had train travel, both of which had required reserved seats. On the bus was first come, first served. And I waited so long you couldn't get anything reserved. So I got on the bus.
Where was the train coming to in Alabama during that time?
To Montgomery.
Montgomery, okay, all right.
And my parents would come and meet me over there. But the thing is, beside it being racial, I recognize racial segregation. I also recognize something that I was proud of, which is my Indian heritage, my Native American. And incidentally, now I'm involved with the Native, we both are involved with the Native Americans in Arizona. But I remember that as a history major, I learned something about the Doctrine of Discovery. That was the Catholic Church organizing racial, institutionalized racial discrimination in 1454. And the Catholic Church authorized, the first doctrine was authorizing the King of Portugal to go into West Africa and colonize it, and also enslave the people and use the natural resources. That later became the right of every European king, and of course they all were white, and that produced I just said it. Well, the system of
slavery.
Yeah, that was done in Africa, and also Columbus brought the same system to the Native Americans, because the instructions that the Pope gave was to colonize, and that's the word I was looking for, to colonize all countries that are not already headed by a Catholic king. So that was, and also it was to colonize all countries headed by Muslims. So I recognize that was, when I saw a separate but equal, supposedly, restaurant, that was a continuation of the Doctrine of Discovery. And therefore, I rejected it, went into the restaurant and ordered a cheeseburger and tea with cream.
Now, this was the White Tower in Richmond? Was it a White Tower or was it a
No.
station?
No. It was just a restaurant that was in the bus station.
It was in the bus station.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. So
And
what happened?
well, the waitress apparently took my order. At least I thought she did. But she came back with the manager. The manager pointed his finger in my face and said, "Nigga, move." And I knew that was not what I was going to do. And I refused to. And I was arrested. But that act was the first act of civil disobedience that had been done by any black group, a black person, dealing with anything of a racial nature. What happened before I did that one act, blacks would hire lawyers to fight their cases of discrimination. But that's civil disobedience. That was used here in Selma and used throughout the South, where they didn't get a permit to march, but they marched, and things of the sort.
Freedom rides.
Oh, it produced right. Yes, it did.
Now, so when you were arrested, what was the charge?
Oh, trespass. But my defense was that I was a interstate commerce passenger and therefore not subject to the state's segregation laws. And make it short, that was argued by my Richmond lawyers all through the state courts. But when it got to involving the United States Supreme Court, we got the NAACP involved, and Thurgood Marshall was the attorney. And Thurgood changed the argument in my case. That was a reason why he did it, but it developed with me being in disagreement. The Interstate Commerce Commission had decided that if a facility had been leased to a private individual, as the restaurant in the bus station had been so leased, then that takes it out of interstate commerce, and they could practice the rules of the state.
Because it was locally owned,
right,
as opposed to being operated by a national chain.
Right. So Thurgood did not argue interstate commerce. He argued 14th Amendment due process, equal protection violation. And of course, the Supreme Court didn't want to be pushed that far, because that, to win on that ground, would also make all segregated facilities subject to that court decision. And I say this because Thurgood has put something different in his autobiography, and I'm writing my autobiography. But that was a dry run held at the law school 2 nights before the case was to be argued before the United States Supreme Court. And Thurgood called me here in Selma and said that they had forgotten about me. But if I could fly up to Washington, they would reimburse me for the cost, which is what I did. So I got there the day before the actual case was argued. And we went to Thurgood's suite that night for a bull session that involved almost every black lawyer who had been involved in a civil rights case. And they were asking Thurgood questions as though the justices the next day would be asking him questions when he's in court. And I listened for about 30 minutes. And I noticed that I hadn't heard anything about interstate commerce. So I held my hand up to ask a question along that line. And one of my two lawyers from Richmond said, "Put your hand down, Boynton. You're nothing but a neophyte." And that made me mad. So even though we were close friends, and that made me mad. So I said, "I might be a neophyte, but I'm the goddamn client. And if I can't ask a question here, I can go down in the morning to the clerk's office and withdraw my appeal." And Thurgood then said, "What's your question, Boyd?" And then I forgot it. And I said, "Oh, the hell with it." And I walked out and left. Now the importance of that was that Thurgood argued my case, but the case wasn't decided on the basis of a violation of the 14th Amendment. It was decided on the violation of equal protection. The same thing that I had first raised in city court. And but Thurgood and I were friends. As a matter of fact, in Chattanooga, we had together the school desegregation case. And and that was basically after the time that we had there in the room. So that's.
What was he like? What was the real Thurgood Marshall like? And he and you know, from what I was able to see and watch from afar, it appeared that he also had a genuine commitment, you know, to civil rights and voting rights.
Oh yes, yes, very much so. And he was, as a matter of fact, one of to show you how highly regarded he was, not Chief Justice, but Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black from Alabama, but at the time he was appointed, he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And of course, there was an awful lot of protests about that. And of course, Hugo Black was the one who wrote the decision in my case, which was just great. And he also, when Thurgood became a Supreme Court Justice himself, the one who gave him the oath of office was Hugo Black.
Wow. Now, so does that suggest that, or you know, that Hugo Black was able to rise above his own personal prejudices and apply the Constitution?
Oh, well, I tell you, the best way of explaining that, Hugo Black, once he became a Supreme Court Justice, put aside all of those prejudices and became one of the court's leading liberals. That's the reason why he could write the opinion that he did in my case. Now, the Thurgood incidentally, and I tell you that the school desegregation case was one where all the work was done in writing briefs and motions and everything by them in New York. Consul Motley was also one of the lawyers. And they would send the paperwork to me to file in the courts in Chattanooga. And I would keep one copy for the newspaper reporter who was following what we did. And after about 3 months of this, I decided that I should be paid. So I sent a bill up to New York, and weeks came, weeks went, and nobody sent me any money. So then I got on the telephone and called Thurgood, and Connie Motley answered the phone, and she said, well, Mr. Marshall is right here. And he says, yes, Boynton. I said, Mr. Marshall, I was calling because I submitted a bill, and I haven't heard from you all. He said, how much was the bill for? I said, $5,000. He says, well, I tell you what we're going to do, Boynton. You send us bills for the amount of money that you want, and we'll send you a check for the amount of money that you're going to get. And he sent me a check for $3,000, which I got my first automobile with. But that was with Thurgood.
That's very interesting. So after the case was decided, what year was did they finally decide the case?
In 1960.
In 1960. And so that was what was used by the Freedom Riders and the lunch counter protesters to desegregate the restaurants and also public transportation.
No, they were limited to bus station and bus desegregation, because actually long before Rosie Park, there had been a black woman who had gone to the Supreme Court and won, striking down segregation in interstate commerce. That was a case that had done that. So that's what they did. But my case was followed by a lot of people who did go into private segregated facilities. The students at Selma University left the campus and went to the courthouse to claim integration. Same thing for students at Alabama State who went to the courthouse where there was a restaurant that served only whites.
That was during the time you was taking your test.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that was during the time Alabama State went down there.
For the bar?
In the bar.
So what happened, you know?
Yeah, well, what happened was the day that I took the bar examination was also the day that the students at Selby University got arrested. The students at Alabama State got arrested. And the same day that the United States Supreme Court had agreed to hear my case. That's called granted cert, which is permission to go forward by the court.
What was the name of the case? What case?
Oh, Bruce Boynton versus the state of Virginia. And, oh, you're laughing, but I just found out a few weeks ago that at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., there's a course on my case that's being taught. And who's teaching it? Supreme Court Justice Thomas.
Wow. How do you feel about that? You think that's ironic that he's teaching it, or why do you think he's the one teaching it?
Because I know he would be for the dissent in my case. That was a dissent of two of the justices who said, because Hugo Black looked at everything that was going on in the bus station and determined that the feeding of passengers was an integral part of transporting interstate commerce passengers. And therefore, I was in interstate commerce. So he would be disagreeing with that even now, I'm sure.
So, okay, then, so you come back to Alabama. You wanted to practice in Alabama. You didn't want to go anywhere else? Why did you want to come back to Alabama and practice?
Well, I wanted to help my mother and father, who had been working then for so long, as to make things racially right. And I didn't get my license until 1966. As a matter of fact, when I called the bar and asked them when they held up my license to investigate the circumstances leading to my arrest. Because if they could find anything I had done wrong, well, that would be grounds not to grant me license.
You had passed the test.
Well, I passed the test. I understand I made the second highest mark on the bar that had been made at that time. But I got my license. It's really made for January the 1st, 1966. But the president of the bar went down to the bar, to the Supreme Court, and had the justices to sign my license. And he came back and he gave me the oath while I sat down. I didn't stand up for it, but now I didn't tell the people over in Montgomery anything like that, because I was honored by the federal court and also by the city of Montgomery, the Montgomery County Montgomery County Association, and and the Alabama bar. Actually, I have 40.
The one who held up his license.
Yeah, there were 40 different groups that honored me.
And so, the president of the bar, did you have a relationship with him when he took your license to be signed, or how did?
No,
he just
not really. I knew him, and he knew me.
Right.
But there was no relationship at all. I was just happy that he was going to get it signed.
So in 1965, then you couldn't litigate legally in Alabama.
Not right.
When Bloody Sunday happened and the Selma and Montgomery March, but were you involved in any way?
Well, actually, yeah, I came home one time when Attorney Chester had a whole lot of young people that he was just going to represent before the probate judge who did the things that juvenile court would do.
And they told you to get out. Boynton, you get out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I think it was Bland.
Judge Bernard. Now, Judge, probate judge. Yeah, that racist son was gone. What happened? Chess asked me to go with him to court the next day because he had all of these kids that he had to represent. So I agreed to, and I was walking in the court with Chess, and the judge looked up, saw me, and said, asked Chess, who did he have with him? And he says, I have Attorney Boynton with me, who's a licensed attorney in the state of Tennessee. He said, I don't care where he's licensed in, he's not going to practice in my court.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the way that went.
Wow. So how did the ceremony go in Montgomery? How did things go?
Oh, it was great. I spoke on that Friday from 12 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And then I came back on Tuesday and spoke from 12 o'clock until 3 o'clock.
He finally got, it took them, about 40 years. They found 50 years to get on.
My goodness. Now, how did you guys meet? How did the two of you meet?
I know Mrs. Boynton. When I was in high school, she had an office downtown. And I had a friend girl, like you get the summer jobs. She would go down there and work. And Mr. Boynton was there. But down through the years, I knew he was an attorney, and that was Miss Boynton's son. But down through the years, about 40 or 50 years later, I met him again when I come with him.
You both were with us, huh?
And I remember her very well from when she was in high school.
Now you have a story too, because did you march on Bloody Sunday?
Yeah, I was there, and before Bloody Sunday, I always was a foot soldier.
You were in high school at the time?
I was at Lutheran. I was going, when we finally got honored about 3 years ago?
Yeah.
See, they
you were from the foot soldiers?
They put me out, they expelled me from school. They couldn't even find nothing that I went to Lutheran school.
Even though she was honored.
They say I was influenced the students to leave school and just paid in the march.
Wow.
And
that is interesting. So, so now, Attorney Boynton, Your father had a vision that sounds like of black and whites being able to have a normal relationship. So how would you describe that, and where do you think we are now today after Obama and President Trump and all the other things that are happening that we're watching?
Well, for Selma, certainly there has been some progress made. Selma is not the same type of city that we both remember in coming up in the 50s or 60s. But there are problems on both sides, and particularly problems with young black people who don't know their history, who don't want to be involved, and that means don't want to vote. There are still problems, and they are very serious problems that blacks are still confronted with.
Why do you think it's so difficult for people to talk about race, for black and whites, to have an honest conversation about race? Why do you think that's so hard?
Well, one, in the black community, they don't know. Really, they don't know the history. They don't know how rich and how much achievements blacks have done. As a matter of fact, they hate the history. I make speeches, and I'm particularly deep in black history, and they would walk out.
Young black men will walk out.
Oh yeah.
They don't want to hear it.
And there's so much that they don't know. I like to tell them that Jackie Robinson wasn't the first black to play Major League Baseball, that there was a guy who had an all-black baseball team that played in the major leagues. And he traveled on a charter train, and they had sleeping cars and everything.
Why didn't he get any publicity? What happened? I mean, how was he able to?
It's publicity. You read, you have books in there on it. But see, like we said, we don't know our history. It's not taught in school. And see, when my grandmother passed the torch to me, my generation, we went lacking it, or passing the torch to our children, because it's somewhere we fail. See, it's my generation. We didn't keep the torch what our parents taught us. And we attend to give our kids everything. And see, they've been thinking of that all the time. But see, we didn't have that all the time. That's why First Baptist and Brown Chapel stayed open day and night. I tried to tell the younger generation, it wasn't no Section 8 housing, it wasn't no food stamps. Black people were starving, and they come to church to eat.
Right.
See, they don't know that. Once we got the food stamps and the Section 8 houses, we started, what that word is, not keeping up with what's going on. Then the white man saw that, and he knew that was a trap for the black man. Food. See, don't get me wrong. Projects, when you ain't working, don't have nothing. Yeah. You can go to school, get a job. Projects is for you passing through, not from generation to generation. And see, they don't know that. And long we keep our mindset like that, we ain't gonna never raise up above what is now. See, they found a strategy of young peoples, which I worked in the Head Start sub for a while. The children, they put them on welfare, disability. And once you get on disability, grown men out there probably along with you in their 50s is getting checks. That's a way of putting us back.
Wow.
That's
Excuse me.
Okay.
for example,
Hello?
there's a reason why we believe that Jackie Robinson was the first black to play Major League Baseball. And because we don't know the truth, we'll accept what white folks want us to believe. So they didn't want to admit to all of the desegregation that had occurred in the 1800s. And they caused us to believe that the first black was Jackie Robinson.
So who was the first black? Well, you remember the name?
No, because there were so many of them.
It was
The one that,
one?
yeah, the one that I told you about was named Bud. And the reason why, because he frequently called a person Bud. But you had individuals who were black. As a matter of fact, there was one time the Major League organization decreed that no blacks would play. And then it went that way for about 5 or 6 years. And then they changed the restriction and opened it back up again.
That's very interesting. So now, is there anything that you'd like for the viewers and listeners and readers of this interview to know? Is there anything you really want people to think about the future? And how's the museum going? Are you still planning on reopening your museum?
To reopen the museum. Okay, the museum, which I don't know, the Minute Museum, what I had, that was for Jubilee. I no longer have that. We don't have the support of black peoples here in Selma to support us for a museum, to know nothing about the heroes, what we have here in Selma.
So now the one that you had on Mrs. Boynton, on Mrs. Amelia Boynton Robinson, what was that name? What was that focus?
That was focused so the young people, they didn't know nothing about Mrs. Robinson, Bruce. We have heroes right here. They didn't know anything about that. That's why I had it there, so they can come in and look, and Bruce could talk to them.
So,
and I am in the process of wrapping up my autobiography, and what I would like for people to do is to buy a copy of it when this comes out.
okay. Well, you make sure you let me know, and I'll do everything I can do to help you promote it.
Right.
Make sure people know that it's being, and then we'll come back and do another interview on the radio and the whole 9 yards,
Right.
to help you promote the book.
Yeah.
Love to. Yeah.
But I don't want to speak on it.
Okay. All right. And for the record, now, what is your full name?
My full name, I was born Betty White. Selma White.
That's right.
Strong Boynton. The two last names is my husband was a Vietnam veteran. He's been dead for 21 years.
Wow.
And I got
He was a Strong?
Oh, he was a Strong.
Related to the same?
I don't know. He was from Greene County.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I got that right. Okay. Well, thank you so much.